Welcome to Group Y Live. I'm stoked to be joined this week by the co-founder of LiveHeats, Chris Friend. Chris shares his journey from competitive surfing to building LiveHeats, a technology platform that revolutionizes grassroots action sports events. We talk about his early surfing career, the transition to business, and the challenges faced in developing technology for sports and what LiveHeats has in store. Let's jump into it. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Ollie, good, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, buddy. Good to have you on the show. You're over in sunny London at the moment. How's everything over there?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, just coming up on our first year living in London, and we've loved it. It's been amazing. Always been a big Anglophile and loved British culture, and so yeah, finally getting to live it and be close to Europe. It's really cool.
Nice, man. And what have you been doing in regards to getting in the water over there? Have you been sneaking off on some trips, like getting over to like France and stuff, or driving down to Cornwall and Devon? And
Yeah, I've kind of been doing a bit of both. I've done 2 Cornwall trips since we lived here. I've flown up to Scotland. I've done 2 trips over to Ireland,
nice.
Morocco, Portugal. So I've kind of been like just keeping my eye on Google Flights. I spend way too much time on Google Flights. I'll see little placeholder weekends where I can get an EasyJet ticket somewhere for £30 and I'll just reserve it just in case there's a swell that week. And then if there's a swell, I'll jump on it and get away. It's definitely been a challenge though, like not being able to get the midweek surfs in. But it's a fun time to be in London doing something different, and then trying to fit in the surfs is different. But I'm making it work.
Nice. And you're originally from the Sunshine Coast, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I grew up in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast, then moved down to Bondi Beach after I finished my competitive career in surfing. Went to uni in Bondi Beach in Sydney and spent 10 years living there before post-COVID, my wife and I decided to get out of Australia and check out the rest of the world for a few years.
Nice. And kind of going back, if that's okay with you. So you got picked up by Volcom pretty early on, right? This is kind of sort of teens, kind of like 12, 13, like around about then.
Yeah, I basically was really into the surf lifesaving community, so the racing side of ocean sports, but loved surfing. And then when I was sort of 11, 12, my mates started competing and doing events. And I was like, oh, I might try some of these surfing comps. So I entered a few and ended up winning a Volcom junior event on the Sunshine Coast when I was about 13. And they offered to sponsor me. And this was sort of right before the prime time of the surf industry, is going back about 2003, I guess, at that point. And yeah, really got to ride the boom of the surf industry as a junior coming through. Volcom was absolutely killing it back then. They had houses in Newport, California, France, Hawaii. And so as a teenager on the Volcom team, it was just the dream, basically traveling around, competing, doing events, doing photo trips with really not a whole lot of pressure on our shoulders, just having a good time a lot of the time. And yeah, it was an amazing way to come through the sport.
And were you kind of thinking, even at that age, this is something that you could pursue, like, and make a career out of it, and qualify, get on tour?
Yeah, absolutely. I was obsessed with competitive surfing. When I was like 13, 14, I was doing every single event that I could enter, I would register for, whether it was Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast. My dad was a Qantas pilot, so I could fly around the world pretty easily with, staff travel prices. So I'd pop over to WA, go down to Victoria, chasing any competition basically. And yeah, I ended up getting on the Australian junior side through the talent development pathways that were starting to pop up at the time, and got to do the ISA events for 3 years in Brazil, Portugal, and France. And really at that point, my whole life was focused around trying to have a professional career. It was all I wanted to do. And yeah, managed to get a pro contract at the end of high school and got to have a crack at that dream for about 4 years full time. Obviously never made it the whole way to the top 32, but yeah, had a great time having a crack on the qualifying series and the junior series, and yeah, living through the experience of back when it was a full global tour on the qualifying side. And yeah, it was incredible.
Nice. And on the junior series, I mean, you did like amazingly well you came second, right, in one of the world championships
Yeah,
against
in the
Jadson and
exactly. Yeah, the under 18 ISA. I got second to Jadson Andre was in the final. Garrett Parks won the under 16s. And the year before that, actually, was the stellar ISA year. The final in the under 18s was Julian Wilson won, Geordie Smith got second, and Jeremy Flores got third. And I was in the under 16s at that point. So yeah, I got to witness the some pretty amazing peers coming through the junior side. And yeah, I had a great run in under 18s, and then back then it went up to under 21s in the pro junior events. Had a
Mhm.
couple of wins, won the Mick Fanning Junior Pro on the Gold Coast, and then I won the Coran Cove Pro Junior on South Stratty Island too, which was cool.
Sick. And then after, so like when that kind of wrapped up, was that when were you already like living in Sydney and in Bondi at the time? So it was like after touring, after competing, then that was
Yeah,
when you moved?
so I finished up my junior career, went and did the qualifying series for a few years. Had some good results, but battled an injury. I broke my foot really badly and was in and out of surgery. And around that time, the surf industry had also sort of started to hit the other side of the boom, where the brands had peaked and a lot of the cost cutting was starting to come in, including the team, particularly the team riders who weren't on the top 32. So
Mhm.
I lost my contract end of 2011, so I was 21. And really at that point, I could keep doing the QS self-funded or decide to go and try to study and look at chapter after surfing. And I decided to do a mixture of both. So I moved down to Sydney from Queensland, enrolled in the University of Sydney. They had an elite athlete program that allowed you to continue competing. And I basically, through my degree, kept competing actually pretty intensely and started to do better in the QS than when I was actually getting paid to do it. And I kind of just was surfing, studying, and then working as well to fund doing the QS. And yeah, it was cool. It was a really good time, but kind of started to realize that the years after university, I was actually starting to get interested in business and a career. And by the time I finished, I was ready to dive into my new chapter outside of surfing.
And what was that after? So it was like, were you studying business in Sydney or?
Yeah, I did business and economics.
Okay. And then that sort of and then you went into, was it like consulting or like management?
Exactly. Yeah. So I went into management consulting, which I enjoyed. It was, thrown into everything from Fox Sports to government departments to universities to help solve business problems, whether it was cost cutting or, working on a strategy project or operational excellence stuff. And really enjoyed it. Heaps of different industries, got to meet senior executives at some great companies. And it was through a project actually I did at Fox Sports where I got to learn a bit about the actual commercial side of the sports world,
Mhm.
and decided actually I could use what I've done at university and the business economics stuff, but leverage my background as an athlete. And from there, I actually joined a sports specialist consulting company and spent a few years focusing on the commercial side of sport. Not actually in action sports, more on the big ball sports in Australia. So
Okay.
cricket, AFL, rugby, and we did a whole bunch of stuff across sponsorship, commercial rights, did a sports strategy for a Macau casino, and spent some time up in China and Macau, which was cool. So yeah, a bunch of different commercial projects really in that sports space.
And what was kind of, I guess, the light bulb moment for the idea to like to kind of bring out your own business around events, around sports?
Yeah, so I was always really interested in entrepreneurship. Ever since I was sort of 17, 18, I was trying to come up with business ideas, whether it was a surf school on the Sunshine Coast, which I pitched to the local resort, which didn't get off the ground, or I launched a youth student banking website when I was at uni, trying to get into, helping connect the banks and their student products to the student audience. And then did a little bit of surf coaching work in Bondi Beach and started doing little surf tours down the coast with young kids and surfers who wanted to get out of Sydney. And
Hmm.
so I was always interested in business and entrepreneurship, but had just never really found something that found product market fit really, or solved a real need. And it wasn't until 2016 where I was into my career in the business world, but was still competing at club level surfing comps, and had met a software programmer in the surf at Bondi called Fernando. And he was, yeah, a really great surfer, had moved over from Brazil. We invited him to join our local board riders club, and he came down and saw how the competition was run. Basically, everything was paper based. The registration was done manually via text message. The volunteers would write the names on a whiteboard at the beach. Judges were just scoring on pen and paper, handing the sheets to another volunteer who'd calculate the results, write the results on another whiteboard and figure out who would get through to the next round. And the end of the event, the rankings were all done again, taking photos of the score sheets and typing it into an Excel spreadsheet. So Fernando basically just saw this whole, archaic process for running a competition in a club and was like, hey, man, is this what it's like in all surfing competitions? And I was like, yeah, actually, unless you're the top level pro events that had the legacy systems that had been
Yeah.
around for a few years, there wasn't really anything available for grassroots level surfing. So yeah, it was Fernando's idea. After the comp, he sent me a text saying, hey, why don't we, for fun, build a web app to make the life easier of the volunteers running the club at Bondi? And that's really where it started. And it just was a side project. And yeah, it kind of took off from there.
And this was for Bondi board riders for the club,
Exactly.
right?
Yep. So I was living in Sydney, joined Bondi Board Riders, and they have a monthly club competition. The Board Riders framework in Australia, essentially each beach will have its own Board Riders club. They do a monthly event with 100 athletes from the local area. Will compete in an Opens division, a junior, a Grom, a Masters, a women's division. And you basically just surf through your club comps once a month. And then at the end of the season, they crown a winner. And so I kept doing those events, and then the team interclub team challenges are really cool events in Australia as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Fernando had never really been in the competitive side of surfing; he was a more recreational surfer, and so yeah, it was his first exposure to the surf contest scene at that grassroots level, and he was just, I guess, shocked that there was no mobile or cloud solution at the time when everyone started having phones and 3-4G was everywhere basically. So yeah, that's kind of where it started.
And was that the same then for other sports? So like surf life saving club events and things like that, which are massive over in Oz. Was it? It was the same sort of system that,
Yeah,
like the surfing events, they'd be writing it all down on paper.
exactly.
just,
Yeah,
just seems nuts, right? Like at
yep,
that time when when you got a computer in your pocket, like
exactly.
with the technology, yeah.
Yeah, the a lot of the investment in tech had flown into the big ball sports. So
Hmm.
if you go to a US baseball competition at grassroots level today, it'll be very technologically advanced. You'll have streaming, it'll be automated scoring and stats, and it's quite innovative. They are probably 10 years ahead of action sports. Action sports was kind of quite niche. There wasn't enough critical mass for anyone to have a go at building a business, building technology for competitions, I guess. So what you were kind of left with in the industry was a handful of more legacy providers who had built hardwired scoring systems that you could use at the broadcasted events. And there are players that still do that, they are the incumbents in the industry. But there was really no one who'd built a cloud or mobile friendly system that could be run purely off smartphones and the web browser without needing to have a local server set up at the event or a direct connection to the broadcast truck, etc. So other sports that we then started looking at, so skateboarding was the first one we looked at after surfing, had a few conversations, and really it was the same. People were saying, look, it's all paper-based at the grassroots level. You
Hmm.
need to tweak your scoring algorithm or your heat bracket system a little bit to suit skateboarding, but you should do it. So we did that. And then ski and snowboard was the next one. Again, there were some old school Windows applications that you could download and someone could type the scores into this old school looking program that would spit out a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet for the results, but no one was really doing it in like a mobile cloud sort of way. And then within surf lifesaving, so the ocean racing formats, like Ironman and the Nutri-Grain series that you would have seen in Australia.
Hmm.
That was, largely, again, manual. You'd have 100 athletes trying to compete in a swimming race, and they'd be counting them one by one, trying to figure out how many athletes were actually going to be there. And then they would quickly figure out how many heats they would need to run. If you have, say, out of the 100 registered, there's 75 actually who've shown up. And so that would probably take 10, 20, 15, a lot of time going through those names, dividing them into heats, calling them out. And then you've missed someone, and then you're trying to redo the heats. And so, there was a lot of, challenging, archaic sort of manual processes in all of these sports. And so really what we've just tried to do is pick off, the 5, 10, 15 sports that we really care about, hone in on those, focus on what are the problems we can solve with technology, and work with our organizer partners to solve them. And these sports are complicated, and there's still work to be done. But really that's our mission, is making the competition experience easier for everyone, whether it's the organizers, but also the athletes and supporters down there competing or following the action.
And there's nuances between all these sports. And also, I mean, like when you guys, when you first started, was it just the two of you? So like Fernando was kind of looking after the tech side, and then I guess you were overseeing operations and more of the sort of the business element of it.
Yeah, so there was actually three of us. It was Fernando and I, and then Fernando brought in another programmer friend of his to help us with the first version of the coding. And so we just hacked on it, the three of us together. It was just a sort of after work project. We all had full-time jobs, and we would just chip away at it. Get together once a week, and we'd buy a pizza and sit at the apartment, and they would be asking me questions about how does this heat system work, or why do they seed the athletes like that, or how do you advance the athletes from heats into the quarters, into the semis and the finals. And we're trying to come up with an algorithm that could automatically place the athletes. And if you go from 2 4-person heats and 2 of them drop out, and the club wants to just do a 6-person final, how would that work? And so I kind of had 15 years at that point of being in these events and knowing how much, craziness and flexibility that was required for them to actually operate at a club level. And luckily those 2 guys had the technology expertise that could actually translate all of that flexibility in a cool app. And so, we just hacked away at it. And initially we had no visions of even, having a business or even the dream of quitting our jobs. It was kind of not even on the radar at that point.
It was just a side project to begin with, right?
Yeah. It was just a side project, see how it goes. Worst case, it'd be a bit of fun. And if it generated a bit of revenue, maybe we could save up and do a surf trip once a year. That was kind of the vibe for the first 2 years.
And when did you guys think, okay, we've got something here, let's go all in on it?
It was really probably about 6 months in. So the first version of LiveHeats, we launched it. We built it in about 3 weeks. So Fernando had that idea. He approached me. We brought in Sam, his friend. We started hacking away. And then we basically showcased the first version at the Bondi Board Riders event in May 2016. And coincidentally, the local surf shop was doing a surf demo day at Bondi that day. So all of the brands from around Australia, whether it was Chili surfboards on all the beaches, or DHD up on the Gold Coast, or Burn down on the South Coast, everyone was there showcasing their latest range. And so it was actually kind of a lucky coincidence, I guess, for us, because we were launching our digital scoring system. All of these people from around the surf community in Australia were there to showcase their boards, and they saw Bondi rolling out live scoring, which is kind of at the time unheard of at grassroots level.
Yeah.
And so they all went back to their hometowns, and they're like, hey, you got to see what this thing this thing that Bondi Board Riders is building. We need to get this for our club in Wollongong or Gold Coast or South Australia or Victoria. And so we just started getting inbound inquiries. And we didn't even have a brand name. It wasn't called LiveHeats. We were just calling it the Surf app, basically, at that point. I'm like, actually, maybe people want this thing. Maybe someone would pay for it. And so the first time someone asked us for the price, we were like, oh, I wonder what we could charge for this. And then we just thought, well, to get a professional judge at the event costs about $150. We feel like we were worth a little bit more than a professional judge for the day. So we said it's $200 a day. And the community was like, nah, that's too expensive. It's just software. we're like, all right, we'll make it 100. And they said, yeah, okay, well, that sounds about fair. So that was kind of the pricing model, was $100 a day. And yeah, we really realized within about 6 months that, hold on a second, this actually could generate enough revenue that one of us could quit our jobs. And yeah, and then we started seeing events pop up in different parts of the world. And then at that point, we're like, cool, we need to put a bit of time into this because we could actually be onto something here.
And was it kind of reactive with all those different events in other parts of the world, or were you going after it, or
It
was
was
it sort of like referrals and people would like see what you've been up to in Australia and then they'd reach out?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. The first year of the business, we had saved up, a measly amount of revenue in the business's bank account, and so we decided, let's go. We'll take 2 months off work, and we went to Portugal and we rented a apartment in Ericeira with the money that the business had generated, and the vision was really, let's just like do as much as we can within this 2 month period. We'll build as many features as we can. We'll do as much sales and marketing as we can. So I was sort of just going on different directories, event directories, probably even went on your event directory at the time to see what action sports events were happening around the world. And was just basically emailing different parts of the surfing community. At that point, we were just doing surfing. And yeah, just trying to get some interest, and then before you know it, one or two people in different parts of the world would say, oh, this is interesting, can I try it? They would try it. There'd be another couple of people at that event who would see it and be like, oh, I've got an event in a month, I'm going to use something like this, and they'd get in touch, and it sort of just snowballed a little bit from there. But it was definitely grindy. It was very much, doing demos with someone in South America in broken English, trying to convince them to give it a try. Or even in the early days, I'd travel a lot in person to events, particularly in Australia. So there was weekends where I'd go down to Bells Beach for the Saturday, and then there'd be a club in South Australia that would be keen to try it on the Sunday. So I'd hop over to Adelaide and drive down the coast there. And we're really pounding the pavement pretty hard in the first couple of years. So yeah, I'd say it was a mixture of pushing uphill a little bit to get the traction, but then also noticing that once we were getting people using it, there was a tendency for, cool, people like it, people are coming back, they're using it again, they're referring their friends. So yeah, it was definitely a cool little mixture.
And did you kind of go down that traditional tech route of getting investment, doing seed rounds, and trying to bring in some capital to then take it to that next level? And
No, it was really, we started as a side project. So we kept our jobs. Fernando quit his job after about 2 years of it being a side project, and he was a programmer. So we agreed that we'd get the most leverage out of him quitting his job so he could focus on product development, adding the features we wanted. We started with scoring, but we added registration and membership and rankings. And so there was a whole bunch of tools that we wanted to add into the system. And then I quit my job about a year after him. And then I quit my job end of 2019 with, massive ambitions for 2020. And so, March 2020 rolls around and the whole surfing, skateboarding, ski and snowboard community, basically the event world just went on complete pause. And so timing wise, we kind of say we had a few side project years, and then we had to go on basically hiatus during the first year and a half of COVID. But we were both full time, and we just put on another full-time contract at the time. So we were thinking, what could we build to keep, the lights on for this business during COVID? And we ended up coming up with a different platform idea called Clipero, which was a virtual competition system where we kind of took what we'd done with LiveHeats but applied it to the video comps world, which at the time was really popular because you'd have all these organizations canceling their events and then saying, hey, we're going to do a virtual competition, so submit your videos and we'll judge them and score them. And so we did everything from helping Surfing Australia launch their first virtual championship to Rip Curl. Grom Search did their full Grom Search series virtually that year. And then randomly, the American Kennel Club, so the Dog Show Association, that's like a huge, multi-million-dollar organization based in Manhattan that runs dog shows all over the US. You've probably seen the Netflix documentaries somehow found out about what we were doing, and they had just cancelled the American Dog Show, and they decided to move all their dog shows virtually. And so we basically got our biggest ever customer in the history of the business, but it came from outside of the action sports world. And so we kind of had the business survived on virtual dog shows for the first part of COVID. And then as the COVID things started going back to normal, then we started getting a lot of interest in live heats again.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, post COVID, we went through a really massive boom in business. Things started taking off. And then we decided in 2022 to raise a round of angel funding. So we raised $500,000, and we had about 7 investors participate in that round. And that was really to see what would it look for our business to take on a bit of investment, add 3 or 4 extra staff, see if that would move the needle. But we did it quite cautiously. We knew that being a niche software company, we're not the next Canva or, a massive company that can sell to every business in the world. Our software can be sold to maybe 2 to 5,000 businesses in the world across all the action sports organizations. So we knew that we weren't going to be a venture capital type company, but we could be a great sports tech, sports media type company with the right investors who would share our vision. And so really that was the initial model. Was we side project mode, fully bootstrapped it, and then cautiously have sort of taken on capital once we feel like we could invest in some projects that could get us back into the black.
And with what happened with the dog shows, did that kind of give you a bit of an appetite of going, okay, do we step outside the action sports world? It's definitely got legs, so to speak, and kind of like looking at it going, yeah, like how did you kind of negotiate that, looking at mainstream sports in comparison to action sports and sort of balancing all of that?
Yeah, good question. It was actually a bit of an inflection point for us because, we did have this big contract in the dog world, or dog show world. And we were thinking, cool, we could do this in gymnastics, we could do this in dog shows. Like, we're thinking of all of the other sports that we could do virtual comps in, but also expand live heats into. And then really our first virtual dog show that went live with this particular customer, we started getting calls from their customers, so the actual competitors who are entering their dogs into the events. And immediately we realized that this is not a culture and a community that we actually are a part of. We don't understand them. We're on the phone with 75-year-old women from Oregon who are complaining that their iPhone won't connect to the internet, and they need tech support from us on how do I upload the video of my Labrador into this stupid app you guys have got. And yeah, we're getting abused, and we were just like, we want to deal with our people, surfers, skateboarders, skiers and snowboarders. We really quickly realized that building a business in any market, you have to be willing to spend time with those people. You have to be willing to be on Zoom calls with them, every couple of days. You need to be willing to be at the events with them, from 9 till 6, and go to dinner and go to drinks. And you don't really want to be doing that in the communities that you don't have a nice vibe with. And so that actually was an inflection point for us, where we thought, cool, actually, we want to remain core. We are passionate about the sports that I came through as a competitor, and that we actually participate in ourselves. And so, yeah, even though there are big markets out there in, say, gymnastics or ice skating or these other artistic sports that actually share a fair bit of similarities with how surfing and the sports we work in work, we really realize that, yeah, you just have to be willing to be in the trenches with your customers. And if you don't feel like you can relate to them, it just makes it a little bit harder. And really, that's been a guiding principle for us ever since.
That's super interesting. So it's kind of like being entrenched within these communities within action sports is sort of, I mean, one, it makes it more fun, and two, it just probably makes it that much more like enjoyable and easier to kind of just do those negotiations and deal with those companies and with those people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And building businesses is hard. Like, we're now, next year will be 10 years of Live Heats, as much as it was side project and the bit of the COVID hiatus. But it takes a long time, and you got to really be willing to put in a decade, 2 decades into building your business. And if you're doing it in an industry or a market you're not passionate about or you don't have that affinity with, it just makes those harder moments even harder.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what we're doing, I guess, is, there's ups and downs, and there'll be times where, it may not work out with a customer, or we realize we're not the right fit, or something happens in a direction that doesn't, feel amazing, and you go through these lows. But because you're doing something that you actually really care about, and you go to the beach in Bali and you see the local surfing contest using live heats and the kids all stoked following it, it kind of keeps you going and keeps you plowing through those hard times. So yeah, we feel like that's actually one of our values, I guess, is we say to get intense, get inside the tents as much as possible, but also, it's one of our values around raising the bar of intensity. And really that's kind of what we focus on, is the sports that we care about, we know we can have an impact in, and then we're willing to spend time in the tents with those communities.
And uh, recently, you guys just had a new investment round. Congratulations on that. And yeah, a few sort of key people, I guess, within the industry, also outside. But yeah, Joel Parkinson being one of those that invested, along with a few others. And like, how do you kind of see, I guess, the future of live heats and technology as a whole within the industry? Yeah, where do you see it going, and what are you kind of going to use the investment on?
Yeah, thank you. We were stoked to get the latest round of funding over the line. Obviously, it's challenging time in financial markets, so we managed to sneak it in just before the craziness of the Trump administration sent the investment world into a bit of a tailspin.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were really lucky. So we had Parko come on board, who's obviously had a really successful post surfing career in business. He's been involved in some really successful businesses, from Bolter, the beer company, to his involvement in JS. And yeah, so we were really lucky to get him involved. He's obviously very respected in the surf industry. He is on the board of Snapper Board Riders. He's come through, like myself, from club level into the pathways through surfing state level, through Surfing Australia, ISA, and onto the WSL. So he understands our market really well. He understands
Hmm.
the organizers, but then also the athlete side. And then we've been really lucky to get some of Australia's really noteworthy business people who have interests in the sports that we work in. So Trevor Folsom, who's one of the sort of leading tech investors in Australia, is early investor in Canva, Car Next Door, which was acquired by Uber, and a number of other really successful businesses. And so, yeah, he came on board because his kids compete in surf lifesaving. They do surfing, they do skiing competitions. So his kid's athlete profile actually on Live Heats is an interesting one, because he competes in basically all the sports that we support. And so yeah, we were lucky to attract a group of investors who, not only have that amazing business experience, but also want to see the action sports that they compete in, or their children compete in, get to that next level. In terms of where we see the industry moving is, really, you can look at the big ball sports in the US as a really good beacon of what, a lot of investment, a lot of innovation can produce. So really, if, like I said before, if you look at a baseball competition in the US these days, even at grassroots level, it'll 100% be streamed. It'll have AI tracking of the ball. It'll have live scoring. It'll have instant stats. The parents can all tune in from wherever they are in the world, and they can get as much information as you can imagine on that competition. The athlete will have their stats carried through their whole career in the sport. Really, what we want to create in action sports is the same thing. So we've done a lot of awesome work on the data side of things. So we've now connected athlete registrations into the events, which then allows those profiles to be converted into heats or start lists, then get scored, and then those scores become results, which then powers the rankings, which then loops back to seeding of the entries. So we've created a really powerful and nice loop of the competition framework.
Hmm.
But really for us, it's about now going to that next level of innovation. So we want to tackle media and streaming. So we see a vision of, grassroots action sports events being streamed, having instant highlights in those events accessible to the athletes so they can see what's going on. We want better data and analytics. So we actually want to start to, for the athletes who are coming through live heats and they have a lot of event data attaching to their profile every week or every weekend, we can do some cool things with that data. We can surface, for surfers, when do you catch your best waves in the heat? Who are you most effective against competing wise? Give you competitive stats against who you're up against in this event. Give your coach a report at the end of the event, automatically email them a bunch of information about your performance across the heats. Really, we want to build tools that helps that generation of athletes just have an amazing experience. So we kind of say we want the athlete's experience to feel a little bit like DoorDash or Uber Eats, where it's all beautifully personalized. You get instant updates. It's all there for you. You don't have to dig through a spreadsheet or a PDF to find out when you're on. But
And
then
easy to use, right? And kind of
exactly, yep. And take it to that next level where, for the next version of Joel Parko, he could look back and have his whole history of competition on a dashboard with all his analytics in one place, all his media there, and yeah, really give his competitive chapter of his life, make that as enriching as possible.
Mhm. And would you kind of just look at that competitive side, or could it be something else where, say, I've got an 8-year-old here in Portugal, and he's having surfing. He has like a group surf class after school, like after school activity on a Tuesday. um yeah, they could have some kind of filming and some kind of like a highlight reel, and obviously the one, like some schools have their own videographers doing that, or if it's like a camp week, whatever it may be, like they can do that as well. Do you reckon you guys would you kind of, obviously, like the primary business would be focusing on the contest technology side, but could it branch out into other areas as well?
Yeah, I think we have in the past looked at different projects that would venture us out of the competition landscape, but we have kind of learned after dipping our toes into different projects that it's important to keep the main thing, as they
Yeah.
say. So we have decided we just want to be laser focused on competitions. We do see the product actually being used though in a lot of mock heats and training scenarios. So if you're
Hmm.
doing like a talent camp, for example, and you're doing mock heats, we're seeing coaches use live heats now to just do those little, score on their phones on the beach, and all that data gets tracked across that athlete's profile. But yeah, we really want to be 100% focused on competition and see if we can innovate as much as possible in that space.
Yeah, and especially around like the high performance centers, say like Surfing Australia and Casarina, or like places like that, or if they're kind of doing those sort of things over in the US, or yeah, all over the
Yeah,
world
exactly.
essentially, right?
Yeah, the again, looking at the ball sports in the US, which is kind of I guess the utopia of sport data innovation. The amount of data that comes into play over there is just really impressive, and so that feeds into all levels of the sport, whether it's training or team selection or whatever that might be. I think we in action sports are still quite early in the maturity of using data.
Hmm.
And even we at Live Heats, we have lots and lots of data we've collected over 9 years of competitions, but we still haven't had the resources to really do innovative things with that data, surface it, see what the trends are, see what actually drives performance in the information we collect, and then present that in a sort of beautiful dashboard analytics type tool and help it inform decisions. So yeah, we would love to be a part of that conversation and see if we can work together with coaches and people who are focused on competition outcomes to see if, yeah, can we play a role in that? Can we help athletes understand performance is better, help coaches understand performance is better, and use the data that we're collecting to actually, yeah, herald in, I guess, a next chapter of action sports.
And how, out of curiosity, how does it differentiate between the board sports? So say like surf, skate, snow. Is it pretty different, like in the nuances of the sports, and kind of, yeah, like how the technology historically has been, like what they've been doing in the past, and their appetite for change?
Yeah, so the sort of building blocks of a competition or tour is the first building block is you got to get the athletes into a competition, so membership and registration. You then need to organize those athletes into how they're going to be appraised. So let's
Hmm.
say that's heats, brackets, start lists, and then you got the actual performance appraisal itself, which is scoring. And then you've got the results side, whether that be an event result or an actual ranking over a season. So you've sort of got these four pieces of the competition ecosystem. Um, on the registration and membership side, it's pretty similar across all of the sports. You've got, an athlete or their parent joining an organization and then registering, paying their money. So the tools we build there are really scalable across our sports. In the competition management side, so how you organize the athletes and schedule them and so on, there actually is a bit of nuance. So, for example, surfing, you'll see heats of 2, 4, or 6, and you'll have a bracket, and you'll have a no loser round, a repechage round, a normal bracket through to a final. In skateboarding, you'll have a qualification round where you have, maybe 10 heats, but then the athletes get ranked against everybody in the whole round. So
Hmm.
you need to actually have a ranking system that isn't heat based like in surfing. You need to be able to rank the athletes across 100 athletes in qualification, even though they actually are organized into heats. Um, and then in ski and snowboard, you have what we call start list mode, where usually there's no heats at all. It's just 30 athletes who are just going to be starting in order and dropping down the half pipe or the big air course or slopestyle course. You sometimes will, if in large fields, maybe do 2 heats of 32 or something like that. So a large scale. Surf lifesaving, again, you've got heats, but it's, anywhere from an 8-person heat to a 40-person heat. So yeah, there's a bit of nuance in that part of the solution that we have to look at how the sport functions, how does the seeding work, how do the athletes need to be organized. On the scoring side, you will see sort of the main scoring modules we support are simple judging. So in surfing, obviously 0 to 10, you've got as many waves as you want to catch, but the best 2 counts.
Hmm.
Ski and snowboard's usually 0 to 100. You'll have 1 or 2 runs, best 1 run counts. Skateboarding's got a little bit of nuance there around, the street league or Olympic format where you've got runs and then you've got tricks and it's your best 1 run, best 1 or 2 tricks. Surf lifesaving is all just place and timed based. So there's no judging per se, but it is, you need to take those athletes and score them. But instead of 0 to 10, you're just first, second, third, fourth, or associating a time. So that's probably where we spend a lot of time on that side of the tools. And then there's obviously the actual input side where we're building the tools for the organizers to do the scoring, but then there's the outputs. So how does the athletes and supporters interact with that information? How do we make the data available in streams or broadcast or on the web through the API, etc. And then on the ranking side, over the season where you're taking all these results and aggregating those, you do see quite a wide variance in how those rankings are calculated. There'll be club style rankings that are quite simple. Then we work with now, say, the Free Ride World Tour across the pro through to their qualifying series and juniors. And they have very advanced ranking methodologies that they employ. And that'll be different again to, say, we do USASA in the US or the free ski and snowboard events across the States. Their ranking methodology is different again to how they do it in the Free Ride World Tour. And so you do definitely see a bit of variance, but essentially what we're trying to do is just make sure our building blocks are scalable and flexible for the
Yep.
sports that we're supporting. And then now, after the amount of years we've invested into different rules, we can tweak them and basically assemble formats now pretty easily to handle almost any format that you can see in action sports. It's why I say, for example, with wave pool comps coming online, it's actually been really good for us because we can just switch on a lot of the tools we've already built for, say, skateboard and ski and snowboard comps. You got start lists, you might have best left, best right. That's the same as big air and snowboard where you do, it's got to be a left spin and a right spin. You can't have scores coming from
Hmm.
both categories. So yeah, we've got now a lot of those foundations in place that are helping us adapt to the different formats you see across the sports.
Which you wouldn't have in place if it was just, because it is so, it's been like historically pretty fragmented, right, between all these different, not just like the sports, but then within the sports as well, and the different leagues and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'll see, often what will happen is a tour or an organization will decide its ranking algorithm or its ranking methodology in the boardroom, and there's no one involved from the technology side of things. And so they'll come up with these very complicated rules for rankings, and then they'll hand it to a web agency to actually build some sort of rankings engine. So
Yeah.
we often, we'll start working with an organizer partner and open up the rule book and try to digest their rules and just be like, okay, this one is a little bit different to this particular organization. Would you think about making your rules similar here so we can cut down on the custom engineering side of things? But I think that'll always be a part of sport, is people are always trying to make improvements to how they rank and assess people over the season, make it as fair as possible, drive participation, make it exciting. So yeah, we can play a role in that as well, making sure that it's flexible from a tech standpoint and fully automated to take all that work away.
Sick. Nice one, man. And what's the best way if people want to reach out to you, they want to get involved? Yeah.
Yeah, so liveheats.com, best place to check out all the events that run on LiveHeats. There's a link there to our organizer information page to learn more if you're thinking about running a competition or tour and you need some software to help you. And then me personally, yeah, LinkedIn is best. Chris Friend, as in you're my friend. And yeah, you'll find me on there and we'll connect. And yeah, I'd love to chat with anyone in the industry, whether you're on the event side or the sponsor side or athletes, so on. Yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate your time, man. It was, super interesting listening to everything that you guys are up to. And yeah, it's going to be cool to see where it goes as well.
Thanks,
time.
Ollie. Really appreciate the work you do. Keep it going. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for listening. We'll be releasing a new episode every 2 weeks on Thursdays. So don't forget to subscribe to the Group Y live podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when new episodes drop. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to get in touch on Ollie Russell Cowan on all the usual social media channels. To find out about what we have going on at Group Y, hit up the website groupy.co to see our events, latest episodes, talks, and loads more. Thanks for listening.